Well, let's speak further then about the national dialogue. Bring in Mmusi Maimane, Chairperson of Parliament's Standing Committee on Appropriations, because you've got a statement out this evening raising concerns basically about funding as well as implementation of the national dialogue process. Doctor, why are you worried?
Good evening and good evening to fellow South Africans. First of all, any money that is used for public, that is being drawn from the public, must be accounted for and can only be adjudicated through an act of parliament. And therefore, when you want to spend 500 million rands, our question as a committee is, when the budget was tabled, this item was not specified in the budget. Secondly, when you move funds to the value of between 500 to 700 million rands, you need to indicate to South Africans which programs are you stopping and where you're taking those funds from. This is not the president's money. This is South Africans' money. And therefore, Parliament must be given the full oversight thereof. And to this effect, I've written to National Treasury, to the Minister of Finance, to come and brief the people of South Africa, Parliament, as to where these funds are coming through and how they are being actually decided upon. Because we can't just give a blank check to a national dialogue without knowing where these funds are coming from, how they're going to work, and ultimately who is going to be at the receiving end of the lack of funds when this program is concluded.
So a statement from the presidency issued Sunday, which was yesterday, said that it confirms that all budgetary processes regarding the National Convention, which is at the end of this week, are consistent with the Public Finance Management Act. Are you in possession of information of information at this stage to the contrary?
No, the fundamental issue is that the Public Finance Management Act only triggers in when you are procuring services. So booking venues and all of that requires that you have to make sure that there are 3 quotes and multiple provisions that are in the PFMA. That's not the question I'm raising. The question I'm raising is to say, where did the president get the money in the first place? Where does it come from? The president's budget is already been voted for in Parliament. It tells us that they've got this amount to spend. None of the programs that were articulated in there included a national dialogue, not ones that we have seen. Therefore, unless there was costs that were built in that we need to be able to see, we need to understand this. Because in the same way, I'll use a practical example. When the state decided that it would go to court on the ICJ case, 3 departments had to be incorporated: Justice, Presidency, and I think the Department of International Relations. They took money from multiple programs and then wanted and funded the court case. Where is the funding for the national dialogue coming from is the question that must be upheld. It's got nothing to do with the PFMA. It's got everything to do with making sure that the people's money, that 2.1 trillion rand that we voted for as Parliament, is accounted for.
So at an appropriations level then, is it likely, or can it be, now that you've written to Treasury, for example, seeking answers, do you think you'll be able to get these answers, satisfactory answers, by Friday, which is when this first convention is meant to sit?
It is absolutely crucial that we do, or otherwise what it would mean is that it would give the executive the right to spend money, not have it voted for in Parliament, and then after that come to Parliament later post facto. We are simply saying that Parliament must take up its stance, it must take up its position, and National Treasury must be able to furnish us with the full details. The letter I have written to them requires urgent intervention, and ultimately we want to make sure that there's transparency and accountability. The only place National Treasury and the Ministry of Finance are accountable and transparent is at Parliament. It's nowhere else. It's not in the media. It's not to Inelokota. It's where the people are represented, which is in Parliament. And I urge again, if we really are serious about safeguarding the people's money, let the Presidency and National Treasury come in account before the Appropriations Committee.
And would the Presidency and Treasury have fallen foul of their responsibilities, their obligations to a committee such as yours if these answers are not in by Friday? And if so, what mechanism would that trigger, for instance?
Well, by law, you need to understand when a vote is being put together and you move funds, if you move beyond 8% of the total budget, then that means you can only do that through a vote in Parliament. Moving funds is possible only if it's below 8% is what the law prescribes, the Money Bills and Related Matters Act. Therefore, we need to get these first preliminary questions to understand whether they've complied with the law. And if it's up to 8% and there's a budget vote that is that program that they've moved the funds for, then we can be able to all agree that yes, the funds can be used, but secondly, this program will not exist. And some of these programs might be the presidential employment stimulus or other programs that sit within the presidency. But again, in the absence of knowing where the funds are being taken from, which budget vote, whether it's presidency, whether it's cooperative governance, it's still unclear to Parliament where these funds are effectively coming from.
So despite then those concerns around funding and implementation, am I right in saying that you ultimately still support the national dialogue? One of the quotes I was looking at was you apparently calling it a pivotal moment for South Africa to reflect, reset and rebuild. Is there a cost too high for that reset and rebuilding, which the country, according to the conveners of the dialogue, so desperately needs?
It is a moment in time in our nation where, as we've always maintained, the dialogue is something we called for a long time ago. But what needs to happen is, like any other intervention, it cannot have a blank check and it cannot do things that fall foul of the legal provisions as to how we spend the people's money.
How much money is too much money?
Well, the facts are, the presidency budget is allocated, and I'll get the exact figure on that. But the reality of it is, when you think about 500 million rands, for argument's sake, that's 500 million rands, you've got to pit it against programs. Could that money be used in a presidential stimulus, in whatever the other programs that the presidency is engaged with? That will have to be measured against. If it's a long-term, sustainable, civic society-led organization that is not led politically, then I do think it's a necessary intervention. But if it becomes something that is captured and used for political purposes, then I certainly think even 100 rands would be too much money.
Mmusi Maimane, Chairman of Parliament's Standing Committee on Appropriations. Good to have your time this evening, sir. Thank you.